Michele, Cindy, thank you for joining us. Big day for U.S. Soccer. Let's start with the announcement you made today, the Kang Women's Institute. So briefly tell us what made you decide that this was an investment that you feel like is worthwhile.
So I became an owner of the Washington Spirit about 3 years ago, and as the first-time owner of a sports team, you learn things very quickly. And you kind of run into like things that are working really well, but things that are not working well. And that's primarily because things that should have happened when our players were 5 years old, 6 years old, didn't happen, or things that shouldn't have happened happened.
Like what?
So we have, why do we have not many youth actually, girls are going all the way to the pro, because there's really no a well-defined pathway for young girls to be the pro. There's a lot more well-established pathway for boys to get to the pro level, but the girls, there isn't. There are more injuries, something like ACL injuries for female players. Why is that? It's because we're training our female players as if they're small men. Well, why is that? Because not much about female athletes, physiology, biology are known. Why is that? Because not much research money is going into women's. Why can I find female coaches? Why can I find a lot of female referees? You start asking all these questions and you realize the whole ecosystem has suffered really badly for lack of investment.
There's no infrastructure.
There's no infrastructure, and I'm actually amazed that the women's team, national level especially, has accomplished like gold medals and World Cup winners under that kind of situation. It's really amazing. But for us to sustain and actually advance and give all the young girls the pathway that if you really put your mind to it and put 100% in it, you could be as successful as your next door boys and provide that pathway. Significant more investment has to go in. And I certainly don't have the level of resources to put in to make that happen, but I want it to be a small match that light the fire. So that this can start sort of the movement and more people will follow, so that we can build some critical mass, so that we can build this infrastructure together.
And so you're starting with $50 million? Is that the
so I provided initially $30 million for specifically have equal number of camps for girls versus boys. Equal number of female coach candidates so that they can go through a training program. So I set aside about $30 million for it. And then second part was about $25 million to do specifically for female athlete health research.
Without all of this infrastructure in place, somehow the women's national teams have consistently won World Cups, Olympics, whereas the men's team in the United States, with all of these facilities and 94% of the research, has not been able to compete with the rest of the world. Why?
Well, I think our women's national team had a huge advantage with Title IX and the college soccer system. And so they got an early start in developing that 18 to 22, 23-year-old woman in soccer. And then U.S. Soccer was one of the first and only countries to really heavily invest in the girls and the women's side. And so while there wasn't as much research being done, there was programming at a pretty high level on the girls and women's side, both at the college and within U.S. Soccer, which I think propelled the women's team to the championships that we've seen from 1991 in the first World Cup, and then just winning the gold medal in 2024.
And so I know that there is a strategy underway right now in order to get the men's teams to be competing and winning in World Cup championships sort of at the same level as the women's teams. But what do you think needs to be done so that men's teams are actually winning the World Cup 10, 15, 20 years from now?
Yeah, so what you're referring to is U.S. Way. So we have 27 national teams. I think a lot of people just look to our men's and women's senior teams, but we want all of our teams competing and winning on the international stage. We want podium finishes for all of our teams. And so it starts much earlier than when they get to wear the crest, right? So as Michele was talking about, we need to take a look at what are we doing at the youngest ages all the way up and look at their pathways through the different teams and the different levels all the way up to pro leagues as well as the national teams. And that means coaching education, professional developing. Actually educating our athletes better about their bodies and the transformations their bodies are going to go through, and educating the parents on what are those pathways and what to look for in a good club and a good coach. And so I think there's no one silver bullet to be like, this is going to make championship teams. We have to take a more holistic view. And what's really special and how I'm so grateful about Michele is that she's really picked a part of our game that is really lacking the research. Most research is done on men in the men's game. There's very little research on women in the women's game, and it's usually in comparison to men when there is research done. But to have research specifically designed for the female athlete, I think is a real game changer.
The United States is used to winning and dominating in sports, sort of across the board. So I do think men's soccer sticks out in that field. And clearly on the totem pole of the importance of sports in this country, whether you're going by sponsorship money or TV ratings, like soccer does not compete with football and basketball. But if the goal is to get there, is there a thing or two that we are doing incorrectly in this country in regards to men's soccer that you feel we should be changing in the next decade?
Well, I think, as I said, we look at the U.S. way. I think there's a lot of things that we need to get better at in order to increase access to our game. So like the number one thing that's going to impact our senior national teams is creating access to the game. We have millions of kids playing soccer, but how many millions are priced out of our game, right? And so how do we make sure that soccer is for everyone? And a huge goal of ours is to make sure that every kid can walk, ride their bike, or take public transportation to a safe place to play by 2031. And so as we do that, and as we improve the coaching education and do more professional development and education of athletes and their parents, I think this is a long-term view, and I think then you're going to see more and more championships throughout U.S. soccer and our professional team leagues.
So in other words, the strategy is get these kids while they're young and develop them rather than some sort of more drastic change at the top level already, something that we're not doing right in this country relative to.
Well, I think you have to do it both, right? You have challenges now that need to be addressed, and you see those challenges, and so how can we prevent those things from becoming challenges by starting at younger ages? And so I think it's both at the same time. You can't just focus on the youth and ignore your teams that you have right now and the players that you have right now. So it's a combination.
Michele, let's talk about Trinity Rodman. Is she staying with Washington?
We'll find out soon.
Yeah, what are you telling her? What's the pitch?
I think this is really her home, Washington, since she came to the professional world. Washington was the place she came to, and actually in the first year she was not only the Rookie of the Year, but the Washington Spirit won the championship. So she made home in Washington, D.C. area, and I don't know whether you heard the term Rowdy Audi. That's Audi Stadium is where we play, Audi Field is where we play, and we have probably the best, if not one of the best fans. And you just step into the stadium, and actually our players have to wear earplugs because they're so loud, so enthusiastic. So it's going to be very hard to replicate that kind of environment. So we're trying to convince her that this is her home, and we're doing everything we can to keep her in Washington, D.C. If
she does leave, is that a blow for U.S. soccer?
Look, we want as many of our national team players playing in our domestic league, right? I would love for Trinity to continue playing in the NWSL, but at the end of the day, every player has to make their own decision, and there's a lot of factors that go into it. And Trinity is going to have to make her own decision for herself.
You have talked many times about investing in women's sports as a business, not a charity. Well, one of the reasons that Trinity Rodman may leave is she can get paid more money overseas than she can in the NWSL. When you see that, do you think to yourself, we need to come up with a different system here. We need to come up with either a higher cap or different ways to pay these athletes.
Yeah, so the financial is only one of many criteria that players think about when they make their decisions. There's a competitiveness of each league that in Europe and so forth. So as Cindy said, there's a place for every player, and quite frankly, not for Trinity right now, but for every player. If I were a player, if I had played in NWSL for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, I want to go try something new. I want to try some different environment and so forth. So I don't think it's really like necessarily, oh my God, other league is better than the other league. It's really the players, in my opinion, should be interested or can be interested in trying different things, learning different things, being in a different environment. So from a NWSL perspective, we have to create the environment where all the best players want to come here and play. And one of the best things that NWSL has right now, it's the most competitive league. I mean, I have teams in Europe as well, incredible players, incredible league, but I have to say, objectively speaking, in the women's football, NWSL is the most competitive. Every weekend, the rankings change, and it is exciting. It's painful. It hurts, but it is what is unique about NWSL. So I think at different stage in your career, you probably think about what's best for you, and every player has to make her own decision.
You mentioned that you own 2 teams in Europe. You're also looking at a team in South America right now, correct?
And Africa as well.
And Africa.
Yes.
What is the benefit of owning all of these different teams in different countries? What are the efficiencies you get from
Yeah,
that?
so the efficiencies, for example, we're talking about research, right? So how many different ways can you research, human bodies or female athletes? Why should 5 different teams allocate very precious resources to do the same thing in 5 different countries? We should pool the resources, do it once, do it right, at scale, and then make it available to every team. So one of the reasons why I'm doing the multi-club is not like I want to build a feeder system like what a lot of men's teams do, but it is really a necessity. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity, because we have to pool the very precious resources together to do it right once at scale. The other thing is also an acceleration of advancement of women's football. I don't want this to be just American, French, English phenomenon. I don't want girls growing up all around the world and looking at it and say, oh, those training centers, those researches, only available to girls in those countries. By having a team in those countries, I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to bring all the knowledge to those countries. I'm going to build exactly the same state-of-the-art training centers in those countries so that it's in their backyards and they don't have to look at only on TV. It's in their backyards. So if their dream is to play football, soccer, depending on where you're from, it's all there. It's really up to you whether you're going to achieve your dream.
We're seeing the valuations of WNBA teams, NWSL teams skyrocket recently.
Yep.
You got in fairly early. I think the valuation of Washington is, I don't know, quadrupled or something roughly, maybe, since you've got it.
Who's counting?
Right, who's counting? Are you thinking about other women's emerging leagues? You see volleyball now, we see softball now, we see women's hockey now. Are you looking at those leagues and thinking, I may want to get on the ground floor in those sports?
Yeah, but certainly I get invited to have conversations and so forth. But to me right now, and I'm interested in a lot of those things, but I want to do one thing right. The soccer, I chose soccer first. Actually, soccer chose me. I want to make sure that whatever little resources I have, I put all in so that I can actually see the sort of intended outcome as opposed to spreading little resources across too many things and, 1,000 flowers.
And what is the intended outcome?
Intended outcome is to really make this women's football as the best, most entertaining product where we have sellout game after game. And when you have extra time, we're not necessarily competing against men's games. We're competing against people's discretionary time for 7 nights or weekends, 13, 15, 16 weekends a year. Our fans have options to go have dinner with their friends, go see a movie, go see Taylor Swift concert. So why should they come to watch our game? because it is the most exciting, most fun, most rewarding experience. So to build that, we have to make sure that our players are in their best ability to play and so forth. So, and then that goes back to also the equity and the pay and all that stuff, right? So you have to make this a real business opportunity so that could all be going back to investing in the players and infrastructure and so forth.
Obviously, we have the Men's World Cup coming to the United States in 2026. Given what you just said, how do you use that event as a launch pad for the business of soccer?
Yeah, so with the Men's World Cup next summer, it'll benefit all levels of soccer, both boys and girls. We'll see an increase in participation at every level. So our role at U.S. Soccer is to make sure that this World Cup impacts not just the cities that are hosting it, but touches every city in the continental U.S. plus Alaska and Hawaii, to make sure that they are seeing it, are inspired by that, and then use that momentum to transfer them into playing the sport, refereeing, coaching, or just becoming lifelong fans.
Michele, one thing that I heard, I think it was in the interview you did with David Rubenstein that you mentioned that struck me, was that you sort of had a 30-year plan for yourself, right? Like
Yes.
The first 10 years I'm going to be, learn about sort of like consultancy, and then the second 10 years I try to be like an operational leader, and then
Organizational
leader. Then the third 10 years after that I'm going to be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Nowhere in there was I'm going to own a women's soccer team. So, but given the fact that that's how you think, what is your long-term plan for women's soccer? You mentioned you want it to become sort of the biggest, sell out every event, et cetera, but could it be the biggest women's sport in this country? Do you expect women's soccer teams to all be worth billions and billions of dollars?
All of the above, right? I mean, I think that if we make this sport one of the best, because we have the best athletes competing in a very competitive way, and the valuation follows, and we don't want to be just the best women's sports, we want to be the best sport entertainment product, period, right? So when they have discretionary dollars and discretionary time, they're going to look up and say, if you live in LA, when is the next Angel Cities game? If you're in DC, when is the next Washington Spirit game? Can I get a ticket?
Sure, but I guess you have to balance that to some degree with realism, right? I mean, the idea of like the women's soccer is going to be the biggest sport in this country as opposed to the NFL seems far-fetched. Are you saying that I'm just too short-sighted?
Yeah, I mean, look how long we come along in 3 years, right? So 5 years ago, before even I started, a team was sold for $3 million. 4 years ago, a team was sold for $5 million. 3 years ago, two and a half years ago, my Washington Spirit, I set the price at $35 million. The following year, one team was sold for $110. Expansion fee, $53 million. A year later, this year, Arthur Blank just paid $160 or $165 million.
And Bob Iger and Willoughby paid $250
million in 5 years. So if you think about actually at the rate, right? So if people only think about like the Premier League, NFL to be where it is today, I mean, Magic Johnson is our investor. So I was talking to him when he first got drafted in NBA. The NBA finals were not live television. It was tape delay, right? So from there, which is like 79, 80 to what it is today, same thing with NFL. If you look at the rate of advancement, acceleration of women's football, I will submit to you it's probably one of the fastest, if not the fastest.
Do you feel like there's something about women's soccer that makes that sport stand out as a sport that's able to grow like that, that makes it different from other women's sports? Or are all women's sports going to be on that trajectory and we're just late to the game?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think, just like if you look at men's game, why is hockey not as big as NFL or the baseball? So there are differences. There's a preference, right? There are 330 million people, and there's one for everyone or a multiple for everyone. So it's our job, owners and leagues, to make sure that our product is the best and people resonate with it. But if you look at, actually, it's my understanding that if you look at like the elementary school and middle school and college level, soccer is one of the most popular games that little kids play. And for whatever reason, at some point it drops out and then it becomes sort of an amateurish sport, and then all others take off. So that's one of the reasons why this path to pro is very important. Why do girls drop out? Why do boys drop out and become baseball players or hockey players or NFL players? I did have some theories about that, but I won't say it on TV. But so, going from the most popular sport that everyone plays to almost amateurish. So that's what we have to work on.
Well, just one last thing on that. I gather you got some theories. One strikes me as obvious, though, which is that in this country, currently, the star athletes are not soccer players. They are baseball players and basketball players and football players. So, and I'm sure you think about this too, Cindy, like how do you change that?
Yeah, I think part of our job as the national governing body is to help build those stars on all of our teams, right? And working with our professional leagues to do that as well. So working hand in hand with the NWSL and helping to build up the stardom of the female players. And I think you're starting to see that. There's a reason why, right, with Trinity Rodman, and then there's a big push to try to keep her in the NWSL. We'll see what happens there.
Absolutely. But I actually even heard, I don't know whether I can say this, but I heard people say Americans like high score games. So soccer is such a low score game that Americans don't like it. And I said, well, let's look at American football. When you say, let's say 21-14, it's not 21 goals and 14 goals, it's 3-2, right? Sure. So should soccer, for every goal, should we say, 5 points per each? So, I mean, it's a unique game, and I think people have to like it. I'm not saying that, just this is by definition, it's going to be the best, but that's our job. And, the Washington Spirit, when I took over, average attendance at the stadium was about 2,000-3,000. Today, we average over 15,000, and we routinely sell out 20,000 person stadium. So we need a bigger stadium.
I think you cracked the code there. Just do 10 goals for every one goal, and then that's it. You guys can pack up shop. You don't even need it.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
All right, Michele, Cindy, thank you guys both.
You.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.